Hello and welcome to Kaam Kahani, a podcast for the career curious. Today we have with us Nida Khan. She's a therapist, educationist, and a lyricist. Welcome, Nida Khan.
Overselling it.
A bit.
Thank you, Haris. Thank you.
So Nida, you're a double master's in psychology. You're an educationist, amongst other things. How do you introduce yourself in the long form?
And I was having this conversation with you earlier that in my 20s and the earlier days, there was a desire to put the whole CV in some ways in my introduction, ताकि be like, ye bhi kiya hai. And then over time, with the security and the fluidity which I found in my work, I go by wellness practitioner because I feel like that's a good umbrella term to encompass. I always say not just the work that I do, but my ethos in life, because my work is part of my ethos in life. So I'm a wellness practitioner, and that includes then the lyricism, and that includes the creative parts of it, and that includes the therapeutic parts of it, and the teaching parts of it, and everything.
And is that like a universally understood term? Like if you were to tell somebody, I'm a wellness practitioner, are they supposed to get what that is?
I like that it's got an openness and a little bit of ambiguity around it, because I don't think it's completely clear. I think it's an umbrella term, right? Because I think that under wellness, it's like the first question is, okay, well, it's like mind wellness, body wellness, meditation. And I like that it's got that openness, because I think that that's kind of what at least the wellness that I practice embodies, right? It involves body work, it involves soul work, it involves spirituality, it involves creativity, it involves meditation. So I don't think that it communicates all the specificity, and I think because it doesn't communicate the specificity and it communicates an essence, the essence at this point in my life feels more authentic and true than the specificity.
And it's sort of like a conversation starter also, right?
Yeah.
And introductions are usually more like conversations rather than sort of like a monologue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's better than, like I said, doing the CV, right? Yeah.
No, I agree. So you once told me a few years ago when we met, and I was asking you about what therapy is and what you do, and you said the beauty of therapy, one of the great things about therapy, being a therapist, was that you don't have to sit in front of a computer.
That was pre-pandemic.
That was absolutely. It was pre-pandemic. So, I mean, is that something that? Tell me about your work-life balance, because that seems to be like an important theme.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do find it funny, because I do remember I said that, and it was pre-pandemic, and there was the joy of therapy being so dynamic and so energetically. It's an energetic interchange, and so it's being moved in a moment. And then when pandemic hit and it did become kind of working from a computer at home, I think for most people, that work-life balance blurred. And for me, there was a real awakening in that. Because my awakening was work is path of life, and life is path, and that for me, my work isn't just wellness, but my outlook on life is wellness, right? I've embodied the work that I do for myself. It's been a journey to get there, but for me, I feel like my life's work has been integrating what I do into a way of living. So in some ways, when those boundaries got blurred between work outside of home and work inside of home, and it became computer-based, coming out of the pandemic, I realized that actually my work is my path in life, and my path in life is the work that I do. And so to me, my work-life balance, it's not even about the balance, because they are one. There's a oneness there, there's an integration there, where the work informs the way that I live, and the way that I live now informs the work that I do. So they live in harmony.
So I mean, is that sort of the ideal sort of work-life balance, that it becomes one and it's not even two different things anymore? And is that, so a lot of people are told to follow their passions and to do what they love, and sometimes they're told to love what they do, But do you think that's what people should aspire to find out what they do best and what they love to do, and then do just that, make it their life's work?
so you know this about me because we've, we worked together in some capacity years ago. We're teaching that I can't really subscribe to the shoulds because I know that a lot of the stuff is conditioning about how, the things that we shouldn't supposed to be doing. What I can say is that I think that integration and being is really fundamental. There's like an openness of the soul that happens. There, like Carl Jung, who was a really well-known figure in the world of psychology, would say that, remember, I don't want to misquote him a little bit, but the essence is that go back
we won't know.
to what you exactly, unless someone just Googles it. But go back to what it is that you really enjoyed doing as a kid. If it was skipping stones across the water, picking up soil and smelling it, smearing crayon across the wall, lying down underneath the sunshine, making music, reading, writing. Go back to what it is that you did as a kid, and somewhere in there you'll find the path that you're meant to be living on, right? I'm drawn, first of all, I'm really drawn to working with people out in nature because there's a sense of like the char diwari mein hum sab keh dein, as it is for COVID. But not only that, but real connection and community is this. It's a connection with each other, and then it's connection to all the life outside as well, right? The trees, the air, the natural world that we've moved away from, right? As a result of industrialization and technology. So there's something really healing about connecting to all the living energies that are there, being with a group of people out in nature. And so community is something which I think is healing for me in my life. Like that's what I want my life to be. I want my life to be healing relationships and community and balance. And for me, it's like, okay, well, that's what I've recognized is important for me in terms of what I can offer as well for healing for other people. So it's beautiful because it's like I would long to be out in nature, in connection and community with people. And I can offer that, with my partner, Maheen Muhammad, whom I work with very frequently with people. And it's like, okay, so now I get to go take the kind of trip that I want with intentional, meaningful conversation, not some random small talk, this and that, but building a circle in this really particular way. And I somehow get to call that my job. It doesn't seem fair, but that is it. That's the life that I want to live, and so work is the life that I want to live.
So do you think being in the middle of nature, does that add to the effectiveness of therapy, or what is it? Is it even therapy? What do you call it?
Just think about this, Haris. You and I were having a conversation before this about how sometimes online leaves something to be desired. I'm grateful for technology. If it didn't exist, I don't know what would have happened to wellness in the last few years. I think technology saved a lot of us. It saved me. It saved my work, and I think personally it was so important for me. So I'm grateful for it, and I think that we really felt the importance of connection. So this is life, but everything outside that window is life too, right? There's life all around us. And when I don't have a person to talk to, there's still the air, the sky, the birds. So imagine being able to lean into all the living resource that's around us. We put all this burden on relationships, which is beautiful. It's a unique burden we're able to put on relationships, but imagine being able to lean into all of life as it's available. So absolutely, I think it's so crucial. And then there's science that backs up that having green spaces and open air and all of that lowers blood pressure and it's good for your, brain waves, and it helps us see. So there's the science and the biology that backs it up. But to me, there's the philosophy of it. It's like there's life all around us. Why are we narrowing it down to this much that we're taking, we're putting all this pressure on when it's free? It's free and it's right there. Reach out your hand and it's right there.
That's an enviable sort of work day for you.
Yeah.
So I have a question. You work a lot with young people, adolescents. How clear are young people in what they want? I mean, I remember back in the day when I was young, I was a kid growing up, I wasn't very clear at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But are young people more sort of aware now? Are they more self-aware? Are they more aware of the opportunities that are available?
So, yes. I think that every generation that comes is just more with it in some way. And I know the generation before me will be like, nahi, lekin ye nahi hai, wo nahi hai, and they're so much more lazy, and the millennials and this, that, and whatnot. I think that they have a lot more self-awareness and depth, and they're a lot more challenging, and questioning of the norms of the world for sure than even, my generation or our generation, the ones above. So I do think that they are more aware. so to me, there's a difference between being and doing, right? So like in my experience, like the world that we live in has a lot of pressure on doing. What are you going to be when you grow up? What's the path that you're going to take? What are you going to do after this? And what's the plan after this? Do I think that young people are very clear on what they want to do? No. Do I think that that's important for them to know what they want to do? If I'm being honest, no. But I think the human being part of it is so much more valuable than the human doing part of it. Do I think that young people are more connected to a sense and a longing and a burning desire to kind of touch into how we want to be? Yeah, I think that the young people that I see now, they're so much more driven and in touch, and their momentum comes from having a sense of who they want to be, looking for that sense of being when they're younger, not just taking it for granted, the being that's been handed to them and told them about how they have to be, but really forging that for themselves. That's a clarity that I don't think I had at that point. So, like I said, I was like, maybe not so much in the doing part, but I think that they're much more deeply connected to finding a sense of being. They also live in a world, I think, that makes it more difficult to find a sense of being because massive overstimulation and all this messaging from different places. But that negotiation is a huge part. I think that they're in the thick of that negotiating, of figuring out who they want to be, losing that sense of being, finding that sense of being. Yeah.
So, okay, so yes, so they're in a much better place, they're more aware. And so what do you think are the resources that are available to them? Like, especially in our society, in Pakistan, what are the resources available for young people which can help them sort of really navigate this new world?
I mean, what they have is something that I think many generations before them couldn't have fathomed, every resource is available at fingertips. It's just, it's like, I was speaking to somebody the other day, like one of my younger clients was kind of like, oh, I'm on break, so I'm just going to teach myself guitar off YouTube. It's a very minor example of the fact that, like, all right, इस ज़माने में तो like, चलो ठीक है, कौन सिखाएगा guitar उसको, teacher ढूंढो, or let's find someone who plays, and then उसके साथ jam करो and all these चीज़ें. And I'm a musician, so I went down that route. And there's somebody who's kind of like 14, 15, being like, all right, cool, I'm just going to go on YouTube. And that's this, but the connection, the community that they're able to find because of that. You and I were talking about poetry earlier and poetry circles. I think finding connection and community is so much more possible because there are avenues to build connection between what would otherwise feel like very separate spaces. You don't have to be in the same school to find each other. You don't have to be in the same neighborhood to find each other. You find out कि किसी की writing कहीं पे पढ़ ली किसी blog पे, you message that person, you find out where they are, कहाँ पे वो poetry पढ़ रहे हैं, you join that circle. Next thing you know, you're part of a poetry community. You listen to somebody do a cover on YouTube. You say, okay, cool, I'm gonna write to that person. Next thing you know, you're playing with that person. That capacity for connection, not capacity, but those vehicles for connection, I don't think that they exist.
But do you think the same way? You mentioned this kid who wanted to learn the guitar, and he said, "I'll just go on YouTube and learn." Do you think that's sort of typical, representative of our sort of young people? Are they all this driven?
Well, I would say that norms are hard, right? Even for quote unquote grown up people and young people. Do I think, I wouldn't say that being driven is the norm. What I would say is being resourceful. I think that young people are so much more resourceful. Maybe not emotionally resourced because the world has shifted, but I think they're more practically resourced. I mean, just also the number of like older generation nana nanis who like देखो phone मुझे सिखा दो, computer सिखा दो. I think that they're so much more like tech resourced in that way. Yeah.
Young people. So you're a psychologist, right? You're a psychologist, you're a therapist.
A wellness practitioner.
A wellness practitioner now. So if you deal with people's problems, people tell you their problems, their challenges, the difficulties they're facing in living their lives. Does that take a toll on you? Like, do you ever sort of carry that burden on you?
Absolutely. Part of doing this work is that, for me, at least in my understanding, I can only do it effectively when I'm really open. That space has to be open in me where the empathy is shining wide. If I'm not intimately present in that relationship, the other person will sense it. the cost with that is that opening that door to connect deeply with somebody means that, things come in. I'm a big believer. That's why I say now that wellness is my path. It's not just my work. It's my path and it's my life. I want to kind of progressively make it more and more my life. So it takes its toll on me, and I try to live my life in a wellness-based way so that I can metabolize it, responsibly, and not be overwhelmed by it and not be incapacitated by it, to maintain the robustness and the ego strength of showing up again and again, to be in those relationships and in those spaces, in those rooms, right? It's my responsibility to metabolize that toll for myself by engaging in things that are wellness related for me. Whether it's writing, playing music, being in therapy myself, finding the other avenues, meditating, all the wellness related things that I find important for my own personal process. Yeah.
So to be a therapist, do you think you have to, like when you said you have to metabolize all that you've processed with your client, do you think you have to live life a certain way? I mean, as opposed to, for example, a doctor who smokes, and during the day they're preaching and telling people to live a healthy life, and in the night they sort of live an unhealthy life. As a psychologist, a therapist, can you do that? Can you live two different lives?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that this comes up in the wellness community a lot. There's a pressure that comes with being a therapist, because I know that it'll be like, agar meri zindagi mein kuch teda ho gaya ya kuch upar niche ho gaya, it'll be like, and ye in logon ke saath kaam kar rahi hai and she doesn't have a handle on this, and agar iska ye barbad ho gaya, wo ho gaya, right? Like there's that whole thing of like, we're not celebrities or famous people at all, right? Like we're these little wellness people, but celebrities are always trying to maintain this particular image or whatever. I do think that, being a wellness practitioner comes with this really unique tag of, if it's hard to feel like we've slipped, and the truth is that a fully realized human being, I know I'm a fully realized human being with my flaws and with my limitations, and with that comes this pressure of, that I'm not going to always get it right, that I'm going to make mistakes along the way. And so I think that I'm not going to go in terms of supposed to or should do. I think that it's helped me to live life in a way that's wellness based, because it complements the work that I do, and I show up more authentically in that work. Authenticity is a big part of building the relationship in this work. I work with a lot of young people, and they can sniff authenticity and inauthenticity, I think, much more keenly than most quote-unquote grown-ups. And so they'll be able to sniff out genuineness. So this is relationship-based work.
That makes sense. So there's a question I really, and I'm sure a lot of people will want to know about, the topic of money. Right?
Yeah.
So people are wary of talking about it. They're uncomfortable. Sometimes they're awkward. So what does what kind of relationship do you have with money, and what kind of financial success can psychologists and therapists sort of expect in their career?
Yeah, so relationship with money. So, I don't know if you know this, but our relationship with money, and I only learned this some years ago, and it felt so intuitive, like how did I not, like that makes sense, of course that's the way it is. But our relationship with money is our relationship with our self-esteem, because with that comes the whole thing of like, am I worthy? What am I worth? What can I offer? Can I live up to this? If I'm charging this, will someone see through me? Imposter syndrome, all of that. So our relationship with money is really our relationship with our own self-worth. And I think therein lies how the relationship someone's going to have in terms of success, not just in this, but in any field. There are people who are making really, 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 really robust livings, in the wellness work. And it's because, they do some client work, they'll do some workshops, teach some retreats, maybe they'll do some corporate wellness, and those kinds of things. And there's that good mix that helps to balance it, or they'll be teaching somewhere, being a professor somewhere. Sure. So that variety, I think that there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of avenues. I remember when I was starting off to be a therapist, there's a real sense of like, oh, paise kahan se aayenge? Because at that point, it was very narrow, the vision of what a therapist could be. It really was the whole, you sit in a room with somebody. But it wasn't really a fully realized thing of like, no, but there's also teaching, and then there's people will hire you to do group stuff and workshop and all these other things, which have opened up more now. So I think that there's a spectrum of the success that's available, right? There's possible to be able to really be able to say, okay, here are all the different versions that I offer, and depending upon our relationship with ourselves and our self-worth, what we charge for that. And then it's possible to kind of really be in a space where it's a modest living, you know. Some clients, I think it's unfair to put the bulk of the financial earning on clinical client work. Because to me personally, some ethics get called into question. Client ki fees kitne badayenge? You know what I mean? How many clients are you going to see in the week? Is it feasible to see more than 8 clients in a day? Do I think it's feasible to see 8 clients in a day? Me personally, no, I wouldn't do it, because something changes in the room. I think that some energy is different, you know, seeing the 8th person in the day compared to the 3rd person in the day. And I think that if we put the burden on client work, then it becomes a numbers game.
Yeah.
Or logon ko dekhungi, I'm going to charge them more. And then the profession changes. I would say that when I was new and I had a lot of anxiety about the work, I felt there was a conflict. And then one of my supervisors said something to me which was a game changer. And she said, you know, I charge for my time, but the care is for free. The care is bonus and gravy. I charge for time. I charge for perspective and that skill that I can offer. But the empathy, the love, the actual genuine care for that person, that's free. You know, so we train skills. We don't really train empathy. We talk about empathy a lot, right? But you can't really train empathy. You can train skills and listening and all of those kinds of stuff, and sharpening perspective, some analysis, some interpretation.
I'm not charging you to be kind to you.
Exactly.
I'm not charging for my kindness.
Exactly. So it's like we charge. It's like we're taking a person's time, so we're charging for that time, or we're giving that time. And that skill, but cares. So to me, that's where the conflict is not a conflict, because it's like I want a doctor who's going to do really good surgery on me, and that's what I want to pay them for. But my goodness, I want to go back to that person if I remembered the relationship we had, if I remember the way that person made me feel, if I remember how cared for I felt, then I want to go back to that person, right? Yeah. And that's something I don't think that they charged me for. I think they charged me for, you know, their time to do the surgery. Yeah. So that's what I liken this to as well. Yeah.
Let's take a short tea break. We'll be right back. I always want to do that.
Yeah.
Welcome back. We have our tea now. So, Nida, what does a typical day in life of you as a wellness expert?
Expert, wellness practitioner.
Okay, sure, practitioner.
So, you know, I wake up really early, not because, you know, I got in the habit of waking up early, very early in my life. I've taught in a school for a great many years. And because of that, like, I got in the habit. So waking up early is amazing because I get to really set the tone for the day. So I'll wake up early, I'll meditate, I'll read for a while. I get to watch the sun come up, get the first vitamin D in the morning. It really helps settle the dopamine, you know, in my brain and things like that. Reading in the morning, I find to be just a really intentional way of starting the day. If I have classes to teach in the morning, which very often I do, I'll go teach some classes. I'll work with some young people in the school that I teach. I'll go to clinic. Clinic tends to be a fairly insular place, even though it's a very peopled place because I see clients.
Yes.
But I'll sit there, the person at the other end will rotate hour on the hour. I'm fortunate enough to have a little community that I work in the clinic that I work in, so have a bit of a lunch break. And then usually after that, if the day permits, there's an opportunity to have, you know, chai with somebody or dinner. And I sleep relatively early. I sleep at about 9 or 10, if I'm being honest, to maintain that. And like, I don't think I intentionally plan it. The body clock, by the time it's 9:30, legitimately starts to fade. And that's just because I'm in this 10 to 5 rhythm. But it's pretty even-keeled. It's pretty even-keeled.
And do you think, we were talking about if a psychologist or a therapist, sort of, or a wellness practitioner's life should reflect their profession, and so this sort of seems to, you know, you sleep early, you go to bed early. Is that sort of the norm, or is that the usual practice that you've seen in this community?
I don't think that it's the usual practice or the norm. I think it's a norm that I've seen in the teaching community. You know, so I've been teaching in an A-level institution for 11 years. And in A-level, you know, in schools, you know, the habit is try to be in a school by 7:30, classes begin at 8. In order to be at your work by 7:30, be prepared with paperwork. It's a very paperwork heavy place. It helps to start the day significantly earlier. So it's something that I've seen in the teaching community. I think I'm grateful that this supports the work that I do. Not that the work supports me living this life, but that the life that I'm living falls into sync with then the work that I am able to do. So that's the, yeah, I think that it just fell into sync that way. I don't even know that it was a conscious choice. Yeah.
So you also teach the advanced diploma at CPPD.
I teach the certificate level of the advanced program level. Yeah,
so,
program.
So like what are the trends and motivations for people sort of signing up? Because I know for a fact that more and more people are signing up for this course and to become therapists.
Absolutely.
What are their motivations?
So, you know, it's 50-50. I was having this conversation with the CEO of CPPD the other day, Samya Chandigarh, and, you know, she interviews a lot of students as they're beginning to enter the program. And one of the things I always say to her, and I was like, I feel like in my class, I have 50% of the people who are maybe want to be therapists someday, but the other 50% of the class aren't people who are necessarily interested in becoming therapists. They're there for the longing to be in a community of people which is intentional and that allows them to connect deeper to themselves and be in deep in their own personal process, which I think is such a stunning mix. You know, it's a stunning mix of people who are like, we're on this journey to deepen our process with ourselves and we want to be able to do this for other people. And then there's the other part that are kind of like, I'm just here for my personal process. Aage tak dekha jayega, you know, I may never want to be a therapist. So I think those are two very different motivations. I do think that what helps along the way is that whether we want to offer this work to somebody or not, we can only offer this work or do this work if we have a longing to do it for ourselves. You know, so for people who come in with a motivation to just be a counselor, they're the ones that I'll say, take a pause and say, you can't take anybody someplace where you haven't been yourself. You know, you can't go with somebody into the depths of the water that you haven't swum in yourself. So it helps to have a motivation to do that deeper inner processing and making those connections and learning things about yourself and what it's like to be in community, be triggered with people, be supported by people, vulnerability, what that means for yourself first. So right now I see a mix, but usually we always kind of steer towards do this work for yourself first.
So do you see that vulnerability and experience with some sort of mental health issues or emotional problems? Do you see that as a prerequisite for becoming a therapist or wanting to become a therapist or being a good one at least?
I think it helps to have the intention for that vulnerability. I recognize that pacing is very unique for all of us, right? Like my relationship with my vulnerability has changed so much over the years. You know, I was so much more guarded. Even 5 years ago, you know, not even 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, I was maybe so much more guarded than I am today, you know? So my vulnerability has been its own process. So I recognize that some people are more ready to go for it or not, and that's okay, you know? So vulnerability itself doesn't need to be a prerequisite. It's not the therapy that's all about, gee, bataiye, problem, this is the solution, let's problem solve it this way, functional analysis, change, you know, super homework oriented. I think there's a place for that. But it's just personally not the kind of work that I offer. The work that I offer is it's spiritual connection work. You know, it's transpersonal work. It's work that really hinges upon building a relationship and letting the relationship open the dynamics and the difficulties that are complicated in life. I always think that when two people are in relationship to each other, it becomes a little microcosm of that person's larger life. तो जो भी उनकी दुनिया में होती है, जिंदगी में होता है, eventually that's going to play out in this relationship here. So there's a lot of weight and a lot of emphasis that we put on this relationship. And for that, having an intention to open ourselves up to be an intimate connection with somebody else is a really huge part of it. So intention for vulnerability.
Do you ever think about Pakistan through the eyes, through the psychologist's lens, and you try to psychoanalyze this country?
Oh, I mean, I think I do, and then I get overwhelmed, and then I do, and then I get overwhelmed. Sometimes I do, like, the part that I think, and I wouldn't say psychoanalyze, but the part I think that hits me deeply is I think of the origin story. Because when we're with people, or at least when I'm with people, I think about, like, okay, the origin story, the trauma we were born with, the trauma we inherit, the conditioning that was placed on us as we were growing up. So sometimes, very often, actually, I'll look at Pakistan through that lens. A country that was kind of born in a little bit of trauma, ripped away from this really illustrious parentage, separated from a sibling, still looking to kind of connect in some ways with its, another sibling that's kind of, doing a little bit better, being stuck in a little comparison, younger sibling, older sibling thing. I think of it as a family system. I think of how the grandparent system, is doing over there. And then I think about all the shame that it carried in its early years as it struggled to limp along. The messaging that was sent to it about how it wanted to get independent early. तो अब तुम्हारे पाँव कहाँ हैं? So I talk about it as a very personified thing, because I really do see it in terms of its origin story, born in a little bit of shame, it kept a little bit separate, So that, I think it's almost impossible for me to not view it that way, because it's the way I look at the world. I look at the world through origin story. So I do look at Pakistan.
And how would you, like, if Pakistan came to you as a client?
Oh my God.
What would you do? Like, how would you deal with that?
That's such a powerful question, because I don't know that I've ever thought or sat with that. If Pakistan came to me as a client, and in some ways it has, because I live here, this is my home, so I am in relationship with it, right? I am with Pakistan, and Pakistan is with me. And I think in some ways, my relationship with being with this larger being that's also taking care of me is to really honor where it's come from and to listen to the stories that it has to tell, and my offering to it is to be mindful of the triggers that I have and not project on it, because I understand where a lot of its behaviors come from. And so to be with it with empathy, and to be with it with kindness, because I think that love heals it. And I think that's what my Pakistan needs, that's what my country needs. It needs to be in a relationship with love and not in a relationship of judgment. And I think that bare bones, that's the thing. If it came to me, and it has come to me and I'm with it, is to be in a relationship of love and not judgment. Rumi always said everything we do in life we can do from a place of love or from a place of fear, and it's a place that can elicit a lot of fear, but to be with it in a place of love more than fear.
So Nida, my question to you is, does therapy really work?
So, in a short answer, right, because I'm not known for short answers, but yes, it does. And it's not foolproof, the same way that I don't think any kind of healing modality is foolproof. Therapy is a process. Does yoga work? Absolutely. Do I think that people need to go for 6 months of yoga and then they're done for life? No, yoga is a practice. It's about incorporating those principles in life, so you move that way every day. It's building a practice. Yeah. Same thing with meditation. I think therapy is like that. With the right therapeutic relationship, in the right client, counselor, therapist connection, it's doing the work and then internalizing that work, so that we're, even if we're not in that therapeutic relationship anymore, that we're practicing and embodying those learnings and that growth for that. I don't think that it's necessarily fair or even possible to put the outcome of a profession entirely on the provider of it. Someone can get bypass surgery and then just go on chugging, you know what I mean? Oil and parathas and sedentary afterwards and clog more arteries, right? Someone can be diabetic and kind of have the best endocrinologist and really struggle to manage their diabetes, So it's like, same thing with therapies, that in the right relationship with the right person, because a lot of it is about chemistry and the match, it does a lot of the work, but let's remember that therapy is 50 minutes a week traditionally over here, right? Like traditional once a week therapies, 50 minutes. Most of the hours of our lives, we're living on our own outside of the therapeutic room. So if we're able to kind of, in that relationship, take what we need and receive what we need. To be able to then practice with that through life, absolutely. I don't know that I would be able to sustain doing the work if I didn't really, truly, fundamentally, on a soul level, believe that absolutely it works.
It's like doctors saying the antibiotics don't work.
Exactly, but I'm going to give them anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it's interesting that you compare the effectiveness of therapy with, say, something like meditation, or yoga. But a lot of people, out there, they compare therapy with sort of what they call the hard medical science, treating a wound, for example, or surgery, and they say, yes, so it'll take 5 weeks for you to heal. Just do the 7-day course of antibiotics, and this infection will be gone, for example. So we don't have sort of objectives or goals like that in therapy, do we? So it's difficult to compare it.
Well, I mean, first of all, I will say that I can compare it to hard medical science too. I mean, that's why I gave the bypass and the diabetes example as well, right? Same thing for a wound. Like I can, get into an accident and take care of that thing, that wounding, but then I got to learn how to maybe think about where I want to position myself to not get hit in that particular way again, right? So it's, anything is repeatable. It's possible to get wounded again and again. So I absolutely agree with the comparisons that get made with medical science, as well. And I will say that there's so many different versions of therapy out there. I think there are absolutely versions of therapy that have very, very, very concrete objectives and goals. And actually, I think that all therapy, it helps. I try not to use the word should because it comes with a lot of baggage and conditioning, but I think all therapy benefits from having a clear sense of what are we working towards. Do I think that our measurements are always as hardwired quantitative? No. So a thermometer can tell you that 98.6 is normal body temperature. Usse upar hai to bimar hai, usse kam hai to hypothermic hai. Do we have a thermometer like that for emotional mental wellness? We don't, right? And so our markers may be more soft and our markers may be more intangible. But I think that our goals can be really clear. And I call them intentions because I struggle with the language of goals and objectives. I call them intentions. For someone who's a more cognitive-based, cognitive behavioral therapist, they would call them goals, they would call them objectives. Coaches in the wellness profession, they talk about it in terms of milestones and goals as well.
It must be great to have something which sort of nourishes you on the side, right? I mean, even though your work is what you enjoy, but for most people, it's good to have something that sort of nourishes you on the side.
Absolutely.
When your sort of primary or your day job doesn't.
Yeah. Like you love, every time we've had a break, we've been speaking about poetry and poetry slam. So you wrote a book, and that's something that's nourished you a lot, right? That's what writing has been for me as well. It's what poetry has been for me. And I love what you said, because you're like, do you read Urdu? And I said, I love reading Urdu poetry because for a while you get to suspend from the cognitive of it, and the felt sense of it just takes over, and you get it even if you don't get it. You get it.
It doesn't matter what the words sort of mean.
Yeah.
It's what they make you feel.
So ambition is like, I feel like an alag thing because it exists somewhere up there. To me, the way we're talking about it, that's poetry. Right? It's in life.
Yeah.
It's in life. It's in the everyday. It's making something for the sake of it, not even what to do with it, but for the sake of it.
That was like a pleasure talking to you today. I know we had like a bunch of takes because of some technical issues, and so it'll be a little choppy, but it was a lot of fun.
Likewise.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on Kaam Kahani.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Faris. It was a blast. It really, really was. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the series is going to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.